Hello, welcome back to Math with Kim. We are talking ratios and rates for this video, okay? So let's talk about what the difference is between ratios and rates. A ratio is a quotient, okay? These are quotients, rates and ratios, in other words, fraction, okay? Now, the difference is important. Ratio, same units, okay? So in other words, if you are doing a ratio with units that are identical, so if we were doing some kind of ratio of comparison where it's inches to inches or feet to feet, that would be a ratio. A rate is a quotient fraction with different units. So rates and unit rates are what we are more used to dealing with on a day-to-day basis, okay? Rates are like miles per hour, dollars per hour, miles per gallon, okay? Miles, gallons, those are different units. Now a unit rate, a lot of us use unit rate in the grocery store because if you're ever doing comparison of food, in other words, a rate with a denominator of 1, or in other words, how much for 1? So unit price. So if you're comparing laundry detergent and it's 49 cents per ounce compared to 79 cents per ounce, you just compared unit rates. And now you know how much for 1. And then you can determine which one's the better deal, right? That's where we use these. So example 1 is talking about a ratio. Now I want to show you the different ways it can be written. Ratio can be written with words 3 to 4. It can be written as a fraction 3 to 4, or it can be written with our little ... 3 to 4. Now, what do we use mostly when we're working in math classes? Fractions. Okay, the more advanced we get with our math and ratios, the more often you're going to see them written as fractions. Why? Because we can manipulate them and work with them better. Okay, so now next example, we're talking about writing a rate. So we're going to write this rate 7 miles per 1 hour. Now, usually they'll say, and I'm going to write this like underneath, 7 miles per hour. We see it written like that quite a bit, right? But the other way that we could write it as a rate, we could write it as 7 miles per 1, hour. So let's look at that. Writing it as a rate, I wrote it as a fraction. And anytime we have a whole number, we can always put it over a 1, right? And when you see this written like this, 7 miles per hour, it does mean this. And why is that important? Well, because this is going to be easier to use if we need to solve a problem. This doesn't really give us the tools that we need to manipulate or the rate, okay? So this will be used later on, so it's important to identify it, all right? Now the next one, where it shows 150 miles in 3 hours. All right, now it says write the rate. Okay, so if I'm gonna write this one, I'm gonna write it as 150 miles in 3 hours. Now, that's written as a rate, but is it written as a unit rate? No. And I know it didn't ask us to, but I'm going to show it to you anyway, because if we want a unit rate, we want to turn this denominator to a 1, okay? And it's not a 1 right now. So that's when I'm going to write this. And this is, again, reminding you of another skill, which is reducing fractions or simplifying, all right? So to change the denominator into a 1, I got to divide out a 3. So I divide a 3 from the bottom, I get 1. I divide a 3 out of the numerator and I get 50. So what is this telling us? Well, now writing it as a unit rate, we now know, yes, I can drive 150 miles in 3 hours, or in other words, I can drive 50 miles per hour, right? So now that I said that, let me write that, because we see it a lot like this, right? 50 miles per hour. And that tells us how much in 1 hour. So again, similar to this one, notice I can write it like this, but it can also be written in unit rate form, or in other words, fractional form. All right. So this is telling us how fast we're going per hour, and that's usually how we tabulate our mileage. Now, let's talk about, again, I already showed you unit rate. So look at the unit rate. I turned it into a unit rate right here. This was just written as a regular rate. And when we turn the denominator into a 1, we've now changed it into a unit rate. Remember? Unit rate. How much for 1? All right. So let's knock out these last two and call it. So 200 miles on 10 gallons, right? So we're going to go ahead and write that as our fraction. 200 miles. We can make it in 10 gallons. All right. Well, what's my unit rate? Well, simplify my fraction. I'm dividing out a 10 by crossing off those little ones. Those little zeros, and I'm left with a 1 in the denominator. So that's our unit. So what does that mean? 20 miles per 1 gallon. All right. Written as a unit rate. All right. So now, again, this is a good time to use your calculator, or if you're practicing dividing decimals. But if it costs $5.88 for 42 ounces, we're going to go ahead and write as our unit rate, 588 divided by 42. Okay. And let me just review. I know a lot of you are using graphing calculators and some of you are not, but I'm going to go ahead and put this one in the shot for us here, just as a little reminder in case you're using it. Well, that's the fun of doing it live, huh? It is not working. So what I want you to do is take your calculator and take your 5.88 divided by 42, enter. Now I'm just going to ask Alexa to do that for us. Alexa, what is 5.88 divided by 42?
5.88 divided by 42 is 0.14.
All right, so listen to what she said. 0.14. And look at what that's written as. And it ends in the hundredths place. And so that's perfect because what are we talking about here? Money. If it's $5.88 for 42 ounces, then how much is it for 1? Well, when we divide these two, we know we got 0.14 or 14 hundredths over 1. So really what that's telling us is it's 14 cents per ounce, unit rate.